was really getting into it, but I didn't stop. How about you?
High school.
Does he like the sandwich?
I'm sure he likes them. Yeah.
What are
He
the best
actually
sandwiches ever made?
He's like 400 pounds going into like through middle school. He's smaller, maybe not 400.
It's
but
fucking
massive, right? And he after he got out of high school lost like all of the weight. Now he walks around like he's really tall, but he walks around like 200, which is very skinny for as tall as he is, whatever. But that dude was like the most naturally talented drummer I've ever met. Just everywhere he went, he was banging on everything, creating beats.
It's like, Dan.
Yeah. Dan's got some stick talent, but this guy, like, you've ever seen the people on Instagram that are like doing all kinds of weird shit?
With
Like
pens, they're like,
he's doing that shit through all of middle school and high school. Like, and
he's the OG
Yeah.
pen drummer.
yeah.
Shout out to Ruben. Ruben.
Yeah. It-
Not only are you a good pen drummer, but you have a great name that is also one of the best sandwiches.
Yeah. Do you have any foods that if it's on a menu at a restaurant, you have to buy it? So you can test it?
It's hard for me to turn down a good mushroom Swiss burger.
Yeah. Mine's Reuben. That's why I said that. Like if I still haven't found a better one than Firebrand Deli in Gunnison, Colorado.
What
Which
about
to this day in 2024, and they've been open for like 40 years, have still never accepted anything but cash.
good for them?
Yeah.
What about Daddy O's green onion, Ruben?
Their sandwiches are amazing, but it doesn't hold a flame.
Really?
Not even close. Yeah.
Must be really good.
Yeah, it's perfect. But yeah, every time I go,
I think sometimes I get a little bit anxious of taking the risk.
no, I got to put it on my scale of the thousands of Reubens I've ate in my life to find out where it fits. Yeah. The only caveat to that is if it's dinner, I don't have to get it. But if I'm there for lunch, I have to get it.
Do you have top three, or do you just rank one and everyone else doesn't matter?
Kind of. No, there's a lot of good ones. Definitely, actually, McGrath's makes pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty
That's
good
the way I am with Mexican food, or I should say New Mexican food, because it's like, or Tex-Mex as they call it up here, but it's like nothing on the planet compares to Sadie's in New Mexico. Sadie's is like, they're like, every time I take anybody there for the first time, their mind is blown. And I'm like, this is why I say all Mexican food sucks.
You ever watch George Lopez?
Yeah.
And he's like talking about Mexican food, and he's like all the different varieties. They got the tortilla, beans, lettuce, beef. Like what's on the burrito? Tortilla, beans, lettuce.
Also, McGrath, they have a taco calzone that is fucking baller.
Taco calzone.
Yeah.
Be careful. This is coming from the dude that makes spaghetti tacos.
So yeah,
Hey, well, you can do some wild shit with spaghetti. You ever been to the Midwest?
Like
Like
in the United States,
yeah, like Ohio specifically.
Yeah.
Ohio has what the hell is the name of that restaurant? There's a restaurant chain where their specialty is why can't I remember what they do with the spaghetti? It's spaghetti, but it's covered in like sweet sauce. It's fire. It's really good.
2 years ago for Christmas, I let Kendall have the Elf spaghetti in the morning. You know, from the movie Elf. When Will Ferrell just dumps maple syrup on
Crunched
it,
up Pop-Tarts.
M&Ms,
Yeah.
crunched up Pop-Tarts, everything. I literally just bought her like 20 things of sweets, and I made spaghetti, doused it in maple syrup, and I was like, go to town. And she, like, obviously elated, right? And then she takes a bite, and she's like, this is gross. I was like, yeah.
Ooh, syrup. I love syrup. He's all pouring whiskey in his coffee.
Yeah.
The owner of the roofing company, or the of the bar, sorry, your roofing company, of the bar, he did a video where he did exactly that.
Really?
Made the elf thing right there on whole thing.
Nice.
I'll have to show it to you again, but
Nice.
hilarious.
I tried it. It sucked.
Yeah, it was not very good.
It was horrible.
Yeah, it doesn't sound appetizing at all.
Not good.
I'm not even like a sweet head. Like, I love ice cream.
Oh, dude, I'm
And I'm not going to turn down chocolate. And I'm not going to turn down good cookies. But outside of that, I'm like,
I can turn down chocolate, but I have the reverse of willpower with ice cream.
Is that part of the powerlifting days?
No.
I met a guy who part of his regiment for powerlifting training was every night he ate a half a gallon of ice cream.
I've eaten a pint of ice cream every night for the majority of the year, every year for a decade.
So let's talk about cross addictions.
Yeah, right.
We got caffeine,
nicotine, ice cream.
There we go.
Yeah. Well, I think that'll segue us in. I think that transparently, I think that all this stuff should be kept in.
I think all of it's pretty good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this is the free form conversation that people will get a kick out of, right? So, but talking about addicts,
Let's talk addiction.
let's talk a very taboo subject.
All right. Well, welcome back, folks, into the Lion's Den with your hosts, Captain Yellow Shirt, Ryan Karras, and Christian Griffith, brought to you proudly by Pride Roofing and Construction.
We're matching on purpose.
This is our, we called each other this morning. We're like, hey, what are you wearing?
Friday fun day.
But today we're going to talk about a little bit more of a vulnerable topic, something that's near and dear to both of our hearts, based off of our experiences in life, the trials and tribulations, the ups and downs. We're going to talk about addiction and recovery. So I think the master over here, Captain 14, almost 15 years sober, should probably take this baton and run with it for a while.
Well, I appreciate the title of master, but
Congratulations. It's a big deal.
anything but. That would go against the principle of humility in a sense, but
He's working his 12 steps while he's answering the question.
Yeah. So, no, I think that I always take the opportunity to kind of share a story, my story, somebody else's story, a relatable story of recovery, transparently, because the only reason that I had the inclination to get sober was because somebody shared theirs with me, right? And I didn't really know that. I guess you could say I didn't know what my options were at the time. I didn't know anything about recovery, quote unquote. I just thought that my life was just going to be a, drowning cesspool of misery until I died, right? So, and I was damn close, that's for sure. But I think that it's important because it's kind of a hush subject because of the immense amount of shame that people feel around it, and then the immense amount of shame that I think their families feel around it. Right? So it's never fun to be the addict in the family or the alcoholic, right? I'll use in this format the words addict and alcoholic interchangeably. I think that they're the same. I think that if you possess a inability to control your use of substances with alcohol, then you would definitely possess that with just about anything else. So,
Probably most things.
yeah, in the rooms of recovery, it's kind of joked about that an addict or alcoholic can turn anything into alcohol. So be it, right? I mean, we were just joking about ice cream, but the brain is tricky, right? It can find and seek comfort through very, very obscure tributaries, right? Whether that's control or overuse or overconsumption or whatever it is, right? So I think that the one thing, and I've had the privilege to speak at many treatment centers, rehabs, youth centers, et cetera, about my story, because I think the one thing that the statistics of me getting and staying sober are very low given the age I got sober. So for those of you guys that don't know me, I got sober when I was 20, January 24th, 2010. And I turned 21 in rehab, which is funny to me. I turned the legal drinking age in rehab when I was there for alcohol. But I think that there's a lot of young people nowadays that struggle with a lot of things that they're maybe afraid to look in the mirror about. And hopefully listening to something like this might open up the door for them to reach out for help or assistance in some way. But I think I've always been very all in on anything I do, right? So, I mean, it's tattooed on my arm, no half measures, even though that's from the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's, if I do something, I do it alcoholically, which means that I do it 100% in.
0 to 100, man.
Right. So, and if I don't have interest in it, I don't do it at all. Right. And, but I remember my first thought that I was heading down a bad path, which didn't come from the things that I think normal people would get those red flags from. Run-ins with police, fairly unsavory life decisions, the things that most people would look at and be like, there's probably a problem here. I remember vividly, I was standing on the porch of one of my friend's apartments. This was like 2 months before I went to rehab. And anyway, so I was standing on the back or the front balcony of Dan's apartment. And it was like 3 p.m. and I went over there for a party. And I was standing on the balcony smoking a cigarette. And I had a beer, and it was my first beer of the day. And I remember I cracked it open, I took a sip, and my hand started trembling, right? And like almost like a Parkinson's tremble, like not really in my control. And this girl came out, her name was Bethany, and she looked at me, and she looked at me with kind of a concerned look, and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I put my hands behind my back and leaned on them on the railing so they wouldn't shake. And I was like, "Yeah, I'm good." And she walked back inside, and I immediately chugged the beer that I was drinking and then opened the next one and chugged the other one, and then I stopped shaking, right? And
DTs, right?
yeah, and it wasn't very impactful for me in the moment. It was embarrassing, but it didn't. That wasn't the reason by any means that I went to treatment, but it was the first sign for me that I thought that there was at least what I know now is a physical dependence, right? Then I was just trying to hide the side effects, I guess you'd say, and from that point forward, I think that if you looked at my life prior to recovery, I always say that I feel like I've lived 2 separate lives, one pre and one post. But if the best way for me to describe addiction to the mass audience would be that, and this is where I have a lot of empathy for and compassion for addicts and alcoholics who are still struggling, is that we use to escape something, right? And the escapism is usually running from something that's too difficult for us to face, so we seek external distraction to face whatever it is that or not face whatever it is that we don't want to face. But the easiest way for me to describe it was that from the time that I was in elementary school, I always felt like my skin was inside out, right? Like I was different than everybody else around me, and I couldn't identify why. I couldn't identify why I felt weird, or like I didn't necessarily belong or fit in or have the same thoughts and desires and motivations as the other kids around me. But my first kind of introduction to what I would call reckless behavior, which was more of the precursor to the alcohol use, was I was very easily peer pressured, right? So like my small friend group in middle school, elementary school would be like, you know, go over there and, you know, kick that guy's water bottle over, right? And I would be like, no, I don't want to do that. And they would be like, come on, do it.
Come on.
You know, and I would go do it and then subsequently get in trouble, and the principal would ask, like, why did you go do that? And I would just be like, well, my friends told me to do it, so I did it. And I didn't have the same barometer of a demonstration of control of my self-will, right? So alcoholics, addicts are kind of the definition of what we would say is self-will run riot, right? But in leading into middle school is when, you know, substances kind of got involved, and it started with alcohol, and then weed, and then mushrooms, and then cocaine, and then many other things. But I never used anything as addictively or as dependently as I used alcohol. So, like when you get into treatment, they say, like, what's your drug of choice? I would joke with them and I would say I was a tackle box addict who's like whatever was in there, right? And it was whatever was in there that could help me feel or escape from myself, right? And which, even saying that now at, you know, 35, it's pretty heartbreaking, right? But I've always felt like something. I mean, I've talked to you about this before. I mean, even sometimes in the office, I feel different, right? Like I'm, you know, in some ways, I don't really gel with like the same things that a lot of other people do. But that being said, I then started to frequently use alcohol. I remember vividly the first time I got drunk to this day, and it was on Bacardi Coconut. It was horrendously disgusting. And it's an interesting story because, like, I was young. I was way too young to be experiencing or drinking, I guess you'd say. But we were at one of my friend's houses, and his dad was out of town. His dad was very wealthy, and they had a gigantic house. He had a music room where he had like a piano, a drum set, a guitar, and a bunch of other things. And then the room next to it had a pool table in it. And my friend at the time had an older brother that was not the best influence, but I mean, I don't think that he was by any means at fault for anything. I think he was just being an older brother, and, you know, I mean, the dude's got his life fully together now, right? So I don't think he was malicious by any means, but I remember drinking a little bit, and like it was the first time that alcohol touched my throat, and I felt like that warm burn, and I was like, "This is gross," right? But the sensation that my brain felt was like my skin was put right side forward instantly.
Yep.
Like, and it was like, oh, this is the feeling that I've been chasing, right? This now I feel part of, right? Now I feel like I can relate to you guys a little bit better. And I don't remember a lot about that night, obviously, but I remember the next morning I was woken up because my buddy and my other friend who were spending the night there were yelling my name because they couldn't find me. And I was passed out behind the couch in the music room, and I was holding the bottle like a baby. And like it was my possession, right? My precious. Yeah, my precious. That sensation, you know, started, or I should say kicked off in the rooms of recovery, what we call the phenomenon of craving, right? So it's like you flip a switch in the brain, and it became my solution, or my medicine, I guess you'd say. And then it just kind of quickly went downhill from there. You know, it was what I chalked up as an excuse is like the normal high school, early college age party drinking, right? But I always took it way further than everybody else. So it was like, you know, they would be like, you know, let's all hang out, you know, 6, 7 of us, and we'll get a bottle. And I was like for all of us, right?
For me.
And they would be like, well, yeah, like we're just gonna get buzzed. I was like, I don't understand what that, like, you don't do that. Like you either get blacked out drunk or you don't drink, right? And I don't not want to drink, so let's get 4 bottles, right? And but it was like that. I was very much heavily addicted to the feeling of total loss of control, right? Of like, I can finally shut my brain off, right? I can finally feel normal, and in a sense, just keep running further and further and further away from the mirror, right? Of facing myself. So, the day before I went to treatment was a very pivotal moment in my life. I won't go into too heavy detail, but I'm lucky I'm alive from that night. But I remember the next morning waking up, and I was raised atheist, so like maybe agnostic. I won't go as far as atheist. I'll say agnostic. And the night before I went, I was alone in my house in just a very self-pitying, depressive state, and had no intentions of waking up the next morning, put it that way. And I went into my bathroom, and I was sitting on my counter, and I had this thought pop into my head, and it was like, maybe you should say a prayer. And my whole life, I'd never, like, I was literally never around another human being praying. It was just like it wasn't a thing. It was not talked about in my household growing up. It was not something that was ever a focus or anything of the sort. And I look back at that now, and, you know, in the big book, they call that a foxhole prayer. But like, I've always, whenever I have questions or conversations with people who struggle with spirituality, I share that with them, because if I'm like, I was raised, it wasn't that I shouldn't pray. It's that I literally didn't know like what that was, right? Why did my brain go there in the lowest state?
Got dabbed.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, and I said a very simple prayer. I said, if I'm supposed to wake up, let me wake up. And if I'm not, let me go in peace. And I woke up, and by the quantity of substances that I took that night, I should not have woken up. And I woke up with 0 hangover, 0 feeling of anything, and an immense amount of clarity. And I remember, and I called my friend Diana. She'll probably listen to this because I'll tell her that I mentioned her. And she had just gotten out of a treatment center, and I said, what is treatment? She was like, I don't know, you just go and get clean. And I was like, where did you go? And she's like, Mesilla Valley Hospital. And I was like, how do I go there? And she was like, I don't know. You know, I think Diana at the time was 18. So it was like, or 19. And I remember I sat on my at my kitchen table with a phone book, and I called like 7 treatment centers. And the only one that answered was the one that she referred me to, right? And they asked me some questions, and then they said, all right, we'll pick you up at the gas station parking lot down the street from your house tomorrow at this time. And I was like, why can't you pick me up at my house? And they were like, we can't pick people up at their houses. It's a potential risk, I guess. And that was the 23rd to 24th. I went there and checked in, and the second version or portion of my life started, I guess you'd say. But I attacked that the same way that I did using, like insanely, intensely, right? So like, I remember asking my counselor when I got in there, I said, you know, what do people do here? Like, what am I supposed to do here? How long can I stay here? Like, I don't know anything about anything. He was like, why don't you just try to get some rest? And I was like, okay.
They want you to detox first.
Yeah. So I had to go through detox, which was not fun. I definitely experienced some pretty heavy DTs, crazy amounts of insomnia. And, but when I checked in, they do your blood work to check if you're healthy. I was not. My liver enzymes were like borderline cirrhotic, and I was 20. And my blood pressure was through the roof. I was a walking depiction of the lack of health and wellness, but I convinced myself that I was healthy because I went to the gym, right? So, but I remember I asked him, what do people do here? And he was like, well, we do step work, and most people get through the 4th step while they're here. And I was like, well, if that's what most people do, then I'm going to get through all 12. He was like, it doesn't work like that, right? Like, it's not homework, right? We don't rush. I did get through step 9 while I was there, and ever since then, I've just pursued recovery in a sense the same way I pursued drugs and alcohol. So they were like, when you get out, you got to do 90 meetings in 90 days. So I did 182, right? And they were like, you got to do intensive outpatient therapy for 4 months. So I did it for a year, right? And they're like, and then aftercare for a year after that. So I did it for 2 years. And it was like, I was so engulfed by fear of going back to the life I lived that I was willing to do anything, which I think is what most people don't realize if they have people in their family that are struggling with addiction, is that the only time that somebody's successful is when they get to that point, when they're willing to do anything. Right. They're quote unquote rock bottom. So, and through the program of recovery and 12-step programs, et cetera, and some very impactful men in my life, I've been able to, by the grace of God, stay sober and help some other people get sober in the meantime. But it's contingent on, a daily reprieve of understanding that it's like when people ask me, they're like, you don't drink? I'm like, no. They're like, at all? I'm like, no. They're like not even like on holidays?
Like, what about at a wedding?
Right. like New Year's?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I literally don't drink at all. And they're like, why? And the best way that I can describe it to a normal person, I guess you'd say, is like, if you're given a plate of cookies the day you're born, right? And it's got, 500 cookies on it, and that's your allowance of substances you can have in your life. I just ate all my cookies at once, right? Like you put drugs or alcohol in my body, and they very quickly become God. Nothing else matters, right? So I don't fear substances, alcohol, anything, but I have a very firm respect of the power that they have over my life, right? So I just keep a healthy boundary between myself and them, and try to stay spiritually fit so that I don't, act out.
Right.
And it's 15 years, 14, we'll say 14 years and 4 months. By no means has all been pretty, right? I mean, I've endured some of the most painful things that I've ever gone through sober, and I've still stayed sober, right? I've gone through a divorce. I've gone through some pretty brutal things, and managed to stay sober, which is something that I think a lot of people find themselves falling back to using because of those type of life events. So if there's anybody listening that struggles with it, it's not a reason to use, I should say, but very important to keep a close group of people around you that can keep you accountable and be there for you in those circumstances. But I mean, I always say that I feel like I grew up in public, right? Like most of the things that most people learn about functioning in normal society, I just didn't really learn when I was younger. I was just kind of like a Tasmanian devil that carried around a bottle of whiskey everywhere, right? It's like a drunk Tasmanian devil, and left a lot of wreckage in my path. But I mean, there's a lot of things that I've done in recovery that I'm not proud of, that I've had to make amends for, things that I've hurt people have hurt me. So it's not like, you get sober and all your problems disappear, right? It's kind of the opposite. It's like you get sober and now you got to face shit.
Yeah, you got to face it and sometimes have more problems.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, the facing shit is the stuff that you always run from, right? So keeping a level of accountability and humility is important, but I think that, it's by no means easy. But I think the choice is easy to not use. And I think that I'm fortunate my daughter's never seen me drunk. Knock on wood, she won't ever see me drunk. Most of the people that I used with, I haven't seen since I've got sober, but a few of them I've stayed in contact with, and it's the only thing that they say to people that know me now is like, you should have seen him then.
Right.
But yeah, I think that it's definitely not all sunshine and rainbows. That's for sure.
A lot of work.
I've had more dark days than sunshine and rainbows in recovery, but I know now that the only thing that would make that worse is if I got drunk. Right?
Yeah.
It's like the only thing that could make this situation that's unbearably painful worse is if I drank. So why would I drink?
Right.
Right?
Probably want to put that on myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what's your story?
What's my story? Much different story, but with very similar threads. Very similar threads. I can very much empathize and understand when you say that your skin felt like it was inside out.
Mm-hmm.
I get that. I've never really truly felt like I belonged in any room.
Right.
I've always been like a universally liked person, but I think that's more of my defense mechanism than it is anything else. Like I just understand how to act so that nobody really dislikes me.
Right.
Call that manipulative if you want, but
I feel like I'm the opposite. Like
Okay.
I never picked up that skill.
I'm very much a chameleon,
Mhm.
My story is a lot different. So, in recovery and through the, countless hours of therapy and things, I've learned that there was some pretty significant, I'll call them traumatic events. They weren't car wrecks and this and that, just things during upbringing that definitely laid a hand in why I was acting the way I was acting. But my story is a lot different. So I was very similar. So one of those through lines or threads is I've always been a 0 to 100 person. I don't give 50.
Yep.
You know, if I'm going to do something, like almost nothing interests me. Like I'm not, sorry, that's not the right way to say that. If I'm not interested right out the gate, I'm never going to give any time to something.
Right.
Right. So like wrestling interested me. I gave lots of time to wrestling. Business interests me. I give lots of time to business. But there was a certain point where alcohol became something of interest. But before that, it was the opposite. So I had chosen. So when my parents divorced in 8th grade, we talked about this on one of the other podcasts. I kind of became more of a hermit type of person. I went really introverted. I started keeping just about everything to myself, and my ultimate plight in life was to become so good that nobody looks at me like I have anything wrong, and become so independent that nobody has to worry about me or give me anything. I wanted to be so separated, but still looked at not like the Tasmanian devil, if that makes sense, you know? But in like high school, for instance, I mentioned before, like I've used this term a lot, but I was like a parent's wet dream, not just a dream child. Like I was the best kid, you know, straight A student, captain of all the teams, bed at 10 o'clock at night, never went to a party, never let liquor or drugs or anything, you know, be ingested, anything. I actually didn't even taste alcohol until the very end of my second semester or my first semester in college. First time I had drank. And so I was the opposite. I went 100% into live a perfect life.
What an interesting dichotomy is that your first experience with alcohol was around the time that I got sober.
Almost exactly.
That's wild.
Maybe like a year before or something like that.
Yeah.
But so I like picked up the baton, I guess.
Yeah.
But no, I was full-fledged into doing everything perfect. And I've always had this, like, you know, it's kind of ingrained in me when I was a kid about we just don't quit. We're not people who quit, you know. And if it was like a sport, you know, there was no quitting the sport. If you wanted to not do the sport anymore, you finished your season and you finished it well, you know. And, you know, you're the first person on the field, you're the first person off the field, you're always hustling, you know, that kind of stuff. It was always just really deeply entrenched in the way things were for me. So, you know, I applied that to just about everything. And I really developed this idea of I do not quit things, right? And when I went to college, so I mentioned on another episode before that one of the reasons I wrestled in college was my pride took over because somebody close to me told me they didn't think that I had the work ethic to be a college wrestler. So I instantaneously, you know, took my acceptance and ran with it. But I was really college didn't sit well with me first in the first semester. I was very studious. I was the exact same kid I was in high school. I honestly hated my first semester. I hated everything about it because it was like nobody was there for college.
Right.
Nobody was there to learn.
Yeah.
You know, especially my wrestling team. Yeah. You know, and there's not a single one of them, at least in my perception, that was there for the reason of growing into a professional, transitioning from, you know, whatever, an adolescent into an adult or whatever. They were there to party, right? And so, or at least I thought so. There's a lot of very genuine, great ones, but I didn't spread my wings far enough to meet them, you know? But anyways, I had chosen to leave college, and I redid my application stuff, and I was going to go back to CSU, study biomedical sciences. It was real easy to get back in, you know, do the whole bit. Moved back home, and something inside of me was like, dude, you're quitting. Like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm quitting. And it was like this fight inside myself that I was like, I just can't. I've got to try to figure out how to not quit. And I was always being pestered by my good friends. So some of the wrestlers that we had a lot of shared experiences and, you know, the shitty times at 4 a.m. wrestling practice when it's negative 30 degrees outside and you have to walk from your dorms to the that kind of stuff. I had a couple of good friends, but they had always pestered me to go to parties, always, always, always. And finally, semester was over. I hadn't told anybody I was going to leave, and it was going to be my last night there. So I was like, fine, we'll go. And the crazy part about this, it's not crazy. It was probably basically exactly what you'd expect, but it was the perfect night.
Right. It always is.
There was like normally snowstorms up there are pretty awful. Because I went to Gunnison, historic. My freshman year was historical snow totals as well as historical negative temperature totals. So they had crazy amounts of snow. But this night was one of the snow nights, and it was good. Yeah, whatever. Anyways, I remember very vividly walking down Main Street, and there's 40 of us walking down Main Street just having a good time on the way to the next party, and then 40 other people that were walking this direction, and spontaneously this snowball fight breaks out in the middle of Main Street that then turned into 200-300 different people that all kind of collapsed into this area. And I remember pretty clearly dude, I'm never leaving here. I had that thought in my mind. But what switched for me was when I said that 0 to 100 thing. I realized when I woke up the next day, nothing was wrong. Right? I was like, I feel a little bit groggier than normal, but I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I could do this. This isn't that bad. And the people that I started drinking with, they're all still good friends to this day. I don't get to spend a lot of time with them, and I purposely don't allow myself to spend a lot of time with a few of them. Not because they're bad people, but because I know that the shared experiences we have were all drinking related.
Right.
It's a real easy way to fall right back in, But anyways, they weren't the type of people where you sat and enjoyed a beer around a campfire.
Right.
They were the type of people where you drank the whole bottle and found 6 or 7 more.
Those are my type of people.
And so I went from absolutely nothing to testing myself on how much I can actually intake while still managing to achieve my other goals on the outside. And it kind of turned into this weird thing inside of me where I was like, I am untouchable. I'm unbreakable. I'm whatever. Right?
I am God.
And so I was like, let's add more party nights. Let's add more alcohol. Let's more, and I was the one trying to get everybody to party more, And it was like when you say that your skin went right side out, I've always been kind of a to myself person. I can get along with you. I'm sure you're probably going to like how I get along with you. But when I drank, I was the life of the party. Mm-hmm. I was dancing on tables, and I was getting everybody to have fun. I'd turn a shitty party into a good party real fast. I eventually created a alter ego for myself, Frank the Tank. Stolen from old school, but that was given to me. I didn't give it to myself. It was that's just who I had become, was Frank the Tank. But I started playing with this a lot, and I ended up graduating college with excellent grades, and I wrestled for 4 of 5 years. The only reason I didn't wrestle my 5th year is because my academic schedule wouldn't allow for me to be at practice 5 out of 5 days of the week, so it just didn't really fit. But anyways, I made it through all that stuff, and I was still pretty good. I was pretty on top of things and whatever. But throughout all of it, I never learned. I never drank by myself. It was always social, but it was always binge drinking social, right? Mm-hmm. And after college, that continued. I always wanted to get to the next party so that I could drink my face off and forget about everything and whatever else. And that grew for a while, and then something happened in my life where it felt like my world got spun upside down. I mentioned the gym industry, the first job I had in the gym industry. I really loved the job. I really loved what I was doing, and it kind of burned up in flames, and I started getting depressed. And I remember watching a TV show where these 2 agents, after every night, would go and drink whiskey at this bar, and then they talk about the stuff and whatever. I was like, that looks nice, And so I bought my first bottle of whiskey solo with ginger ale, and I went from being sad to being happy.
Uh-huh.
And so I started drinking just about every night. And
Yeah.
it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew. And for me, I kept that mentality that I could continue to take over the world because it's not affecting me. I'm different, you know. I wasn't different. I wasn't different. And I started drinking basically for every reason. And we learned a lot about this in my recovery journey in rehab, about how you're utilizing it to basically build walls around yourself or build, you know, it's like you use alcohol to make, if you want to be happy, you're going to get more happy. You want to be angry,
You'd be more angry.
you're going to be more angry. You want to run away, well, you're not there anymore.
Yep.
You know, and like it fulfills every urge your body has, regardless of whatever feeling that's inside of you. It helps you with it.
Yep.
At least it feels like it does, right? And so, I actually was very hidden with my addiction.
Yeah.
The only people who knew about it were close family who lived with me, not even my other close family that were farther away. And it just got worse and worse, and I'd test it and make it, you know, and I even, there was certain times where I'd like I knew something was wrong with me, but I would just drink to ignore it. But then I'd find these like notes to myself from my drunken self the night before, and I had this pattern of writing poems while I was drunk. Well, some of them were completely illegible, you know. But some of them were like, damn, dude. And there's one of them where I was writing specifically about chasing a feeling that you never find.
Mm-hmm. You know, that you know what they call that? The addiction is chasing the dragon.
Yeah, you're chasing the dragon. And it's like, you know, I don't know. I was really, really fucked up inside.
Yeah.
You know? And so for me, hitting rock bottom and making the choice, it wasn't like yours where you told yourself, I'm doing this, and I went. I hit rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, sorry. I hope that this doesn't look funny on camera. I'm like fucking.
No.
But I ended up hurting people around me.
Mm-hmm.
People I cared about, and I put myself behind bars for a little while. I got a track record, so I guess everybody now knows that's watching our videos and stuff.
It's public record anyway.
The thing that was the hardest part about it was like when I actually got into trouble, I was so out of it that the next day I tried, when I woke up while I was detained, I tried to call home and found out I could not call home.
Right.
And that's when it hit me like a bag of bricks. I was like, oh shit. You
Yeah.
know? And so I ended up actually not being able to see my son for almost, it was close to 5 months, you know? And what was interesting about like going to rehab and stuff, like I had talked, I checked myself in, not the same way that you did, but I checked myself in. I did it willingly. It wasn't court ordered or anything like that. But I was doing it literally to just make it look good.
Right.
Like to the judge.
Yep.
And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And then when I get all my shit back in line, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
It wasn't until like 2 weeks into rehab where I made the decision that this was going to be the way it was forever.
Yeah.
I remember there was a counselor in there. His name was Dr. Martinez, and he had this group session where he said, what the heck did he say? He made us all bring something of importance, because when you go to rehab, they tell you to bring some pictures and, you know, things that help you tie yourself to the things you love and stuff like that. And I brought a picture of my son. It was a specific picture because it was a picture my sister gave me. It wasn't a picture I took myself. It was a picture my sister gave me visiting my son while I couldn't see him. Mm-hmm. And I just started breaking down crying while we were having this conversation.
Probably a lot of joy in that picture.
Yeah. And I still have it. It's actually one of the ones in my office. I purposely keep that one.
Yeah.
And anyways, he asked me why I brought that picture and what it represented and when, whatever. And he goes, Christian, do you realize that every time you choose to drink, you're saying to the world around you that you love alcohol more than you love them, including your son in that picture.
And yourself.
And yourself. Yeah. And I just like lost it.
Yep.
I just lost it. I was like, I couldn't even continue talking. He just went on to the next person after a little while and stuff. And that was the day that it changed for me. I'm doing this not for show,
right,
like I did everything else in my life.
Right.
I'm doing this one for me.
It feels. It's almost like the pressure of performing just became too much.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like when I said I thought I was invincible and I was testing it and whatever, it was like I never missed work, regardless of how crazy I went, and I always performed better than the best, the next best person. Maybe not my peak or my best, but I was the best where I was, for sure. And I was always like, it's like I was always justifying what was going on by how much output I still was able to give, And so, yeah, that was the day that changed for me. I'm only, I don't really keep track of the days like I used to, but I'm 3.5 years, something like that now. And, yeah, I mean, alcohol is still a struggle. There's certain things that you miss. Like there are, that feeling that you get, like you said, the burning, and then instantaneously the brain clarity. Like
it's like your brain exhales.
Yeah, it's like that's the thing that I miss. If we're going to talk about what you miss about addiction or what your active addiction and stuff, it was like. But I took things so far, and it's innate inside of me that if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it 100%, and I understand that about alcohol.
Yeah. It's funny because that feeling of the skin being inside out, right? How I felt my whole life. I remember the first in the treatment center that I was in. I was fortunate enough with my health insurance at the time. I stayed for like 42 days. And the first morning that they woke us up, we went to an AA meeting every morning in the treatment facility. And I was terrified, right? Because, well, one, I didn't even know what AA was, right? Two, I am so introverted that, like, sitting in a room of 30, 40 people talking about my shit is like, there's nothing more mortifying to me at that time, right? Yeah. And I remember vividly, and I still feel this way every meeting I go to, I sat down in that room and I was like, where have you guys been all my life? And I'm like, I feel like my skin is the right side here.
Yeah.
Like you guys all are as fucking crazy as I am.
That's the wild part about I made some really good friendships in rehab, and what's crazy is like I met other business owners there. I met doctors there. There was a lawyer. You know, it was like it wasn't just like the taboo thought process towards it. It was like it's just the derelicts or the shitheads. It's like these are extremely successful people, but evidently maybe that's like an indicator, like the type of brain that
addiction doesn't discriminate, man.
Right, and so there's a lot of interesting milestones that you have to cross in order to really maintain level-headedness with it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, being so involved in the recovery community, I've learned and looked up a bunch of stuff, and I've had the privilege of going to national convention, world convention for AA. World convention is one of the coolest experiences of my life. It was like 150,000 plus people, all in recovery, and they host meetings that are in stadiums, right? And there's 40,000 people in a meeting, right? And one of the things that I've learned is that, which is, I think it's a really cool stat. That like 60% of self-made millionaires have addiction of some kind, right? And of the 60% of self-made millionaires, self-made multimillionaires, which I don't know what classifies that. I don't know if it's over 3, over 10, over 100. I don't know, but over 50% of them are in some form of recovery, right? So I look at like I think that recovery is like the ultimate opportunity that I truly believe you get one shot at, right? I don't think that relapsing has to be in your story. I know it is for a lot of people. I know multiple people that have relapsed multiple times and now have 20 years of recovery, but it's the tools that I've learned in the world or the bubble of recovery are universal to everything, right? Which is funny because they're all biblically based, right? And
You're onto something here.
right. So the 12 steps are originally founded from the 6 steps of. Oh man, I'm going to butcher this, but it's from Catholicism, from a book that was written in the 1800s. Bill W. then wrote the 12 steps off of those 6 steps, which is basically the principles of willingness, acceptance, self-reflection, making amends.
Yeah.
And
Was it repentance? Is this the book?
Yeah.
I guess it's structured off of.
and then fortifying a bond with a higher power of obviously the Catholics was Jesus, but I think that like if we look at there's a joke around the rooms of recovery sometimes that like, man, we wish that normies did the 12 steps.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, there's a circumstance here at the office, right, that like a couple weeks ago where I made amends to somebody here, right? And I look at that, something like that of this is a skill set that I exclusively owe to the rooms of recovery. Ownership of my wrong, talking about that with the person that I wronged, making amends to that, and then asking what I can do to make sure that that doesn't happen again and or that they feel validated and heard, right? And for me, like my biological brain, that is so far from normal, right? So it's like it's almost like my thought process now, 15 years into this, or almost 15 years, is like my initial thought goes right to what principle is this, or what principle can I use here from the rooms of recovery to better the situation for the people involved in myself, right? And my biological thought, right, my little demonic alcoholic brain, I always like to just put some imagery to that. I just feel like it's a little asshole that sits in the back of my brain, right? And it doesn't ever go away, right? He's like, you should just worry about yourself, right? Think about yourself and yourself only at all times, right? Nobody else matters. But luckily, obviously, that side of my brain has shrunken. Maybe he's dehydrated. But it's funny you mentioned that, like it's still hard. There's portions of it that are still hard, right? Like I have certain things still that really rub me wrong, right? Most of them are just triggers from my childhood, but like I can't stand the smell of red wine on somebody's breath. It's just like an immediate thing for me. I just clam up, right? I don't hang out at establishments where drinking is the predominant source of income. There's a saying in the rooms is like you hang out in a barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut, right? So like, but I don't fear them. Like I don't have any, at this point in my recovery, I don't have any problem with somebody drinking around me. I don't have any fear of it, but I have very clear boundaries with myself of like, time for me to go.
Right.
That's simple,
Yeah.
right? And I'm fortunate that I moved geographically, first to North Carolina and then here. But so there's really nobody in my life that knew me prior to recovery. But I have a firm awareness that a drink is this far away
Yeah. At all times.
at all times, right?
It's so widely accepted by the world.
Right.
That's one of the reasons that it's such a difficult thing is because it's accepted in every culture and everywhere.
Right.
And it's literally, I mean, it's a huge revenue driver, huge taxable revenue driver. You know, that it's insane how accessible it is to get your hands on, but how terrible it actually is.
Right.
Right. Yeah, and so just to rewind back, because you said that a lot of the principles, when you reflect on things going on around you, a lot of the principles start to play out in your head. Okay, this one is X, this one is Y. I think that one of the most important things that I learned in terms of principle information from recovery is the importance of allowing yourself to become vulnerable, exposing yourself to potential harm.
Yep.
I think that was the thing I struggled with the most because if you remember from my story, my plight in life was to escape any form of connection.
Right.
Like, not because I don't value people or things like that. It makes me incredibly uncomfortable to be close to people.
Well, if you open yourself up, then you can get hurt.
Exactly. You know, and like I said, we did learn a lot of what the traumas were that led to this and that kind of stuff. But like, I spent my entire life creating a castle that only I can live in with huge moats and massive alligators in the water that are not going to let anybody in. But the problem is I had to tear down the walls and become vulnerable in order to actually make it somewhere with this stuff. And it's really applicable to to business and life as well, because in a business place, if you and your team don't have the ability to become vulnerable, there's always there's a boundary you can't cross, and there's a friction, right? And not only that, but then there's hidden information, and there's lack of the ability to become accountable and grow, right? So it's like if we can't tear down boundaries and speak to each other as humans, we're going to find some form of replacement.
Right.
And it generally means we're not going in the right direction.
Right.
That's life and business
Yeah.
all at the same time.
I mean, I think that it's funny you say it's funny how opposite our stories of what got us into recovery are, because you were like the exemplary and I was the opposite, right? I was like, oh, I'm going to be a fuck up and I'm going to be the king of fuck up, right? So like, you think I'm bad now?
Watch.
Just wait, right? And it was, but for me, that was the only way that I got attention, right? So for me, I was just starving for when I got in trouble, I then got shown care, right? Of what's going on? What's going on with you? Why do you keep getting in trouble? Yada, yada, yada. I'm like, if I only knew now what I know then is well, because I'm dying for connection.
Right.
I need a hug, right? And I need somebody to tell me I'm going to be okay, and that you don't have to keep doing this, right? But it's it's you had this shell, and I was just a permeable surface.
Yeah.
Right. It was which I think it's funny because it's boundaries versus the opposite of boundaries, right? Is it my willingness to do anything whenever for attention, right? Was I was just dying for connection, which, stems from vulnerability, right?
And it wasn't that I didn't want attention. It's that I wanted there to be only one form of attention.
Right.
Which was,
Positive attention.
you're doing great, buddy. Keep it up.
Right. Right. So, so how does that play into now?
Which part?
Is that part of you still around?
I still very much struggle with like when it comes to like the things that I'm battling personally. I don't allow myself any longer after doing, all the different stuff that we've had to go through to do, to become sober. When it comes to personal, I'll address things. I'll address what's going on. It might not be instantaneous. It might take some time for me to, calibrate my feelings and my thoughts, but you're going to hear about it. I'll
Right.
actually say it now. But I still have tendencies to find ways to get away from uncomfortable situations outside of personal.
Right.
I still very much have like a let's Heisman.
Yeah.
Let's Heisman that.
Yeah.
Let's just pretend it doesn't exist and run the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that like I had a sober, I had a tremendous fear of conflict. And drunk, I had the opposite.
Right.
I sought it out, right? Very Jekyll and Hyde. Which sounds similar to you in the sense of like Jekyll and Hyde, very introverted and all your ducks in a row, and then you drink and you become Frank the Tank, right? So mine was Jekyll and Hyde, just in kind of a different way. But with me now, with situations like that, like, I mean, you were referencing that situation here a few weeks ago. Like you were sitting in the room when I was like, I just need to have a conversation with him. Right? For me, I'm like, the more uncomfortable, the faster I need to act.
Right.
Right? So for me, it's like, I know that the longer that something is affecting me or maybe developing into some kind of resentment or some kind of emotions that are different than, I don't want to say positive because it doesn't always need to be positive, but constructive, right? I'll say, the faster I have to tackle it.
Right.
Right. So for me, it's just like, if this makes me feel this way, this way, this way, this way, then I need to go address it, and I need to do it in a manner that the person that I'm addressing understands my position and I understand their position, and we can find resolution, period.
Right.
Right.
Right. Well, you do become incredibly self-aware.
Very.
Incredibly self-aware, like so much so that it's uncomfortable. So,
Yeah.
It's like you're forced in sobriety to feel every feeling and digest it and think about it and come up with solutions on how we're either going to not feel that way again by not putting ourselves in that position or whatever, right? Like you become so aware of everything that when something's off. And that's part of the recovery steps. Where I went to the treatment center wasn't a 12-step program. There was AA meetings available, but that wasn't the premise of the teaching that they had there. But that was one thing that we had learned there was simple things like the importance of journaling and writing certain things to yourself and setting up evasive action plans for when you fall down, and then understanding what those trigger points are, right? Because there's a slope, there's like a slippery slope. I mean, I guess everybody's probably a little bit different, but majority of the time, you're not going to just on a whim, after you've been sober for 3 years, go drink.
Right.
Right. It's going to be this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and you're building some kinetic energy towards ultimately making that decision. Yeah. And so when you start not doing things that your healthy mind wants to do, maybe we should start to do a little bit of investigation. Right. For me, it's some of it's simple. The last topic we talked about was health and wellness or exercise. If I stop exercising, like I have no will to exercise,
Red flag.
I am in a huge, it's a terrible place for me to be in.
Yep.
Right? It's a terrible place for me to be in because at that point, I have lost one of my greatest passions. And if I'm losing passion, I'm going to lose like interest in everything else.
Right. Yeah.
So,
So what do you think? We'll wrap this one up, but I just have a couple questions on outside of being clear-headed, right? What do you think sobriety has done for you business-wise?
I mean, that's funny because I remember talking about this in like my outpatient therapy. I was like, guys, I used to think this job was hard.
Right.
Like it's still mentally taxing and it's hard, but there's so many more hours it feels like in a day, and so much like you realize that you have ample time to get your job done. You have ample time to be good at your job. And you're thinking clear enough to also become more and more efficient. So you just gain more and more time. So that's one of the biggest keys. It's like I don't have something inside of me distracting me from what I'm trying to do.
Right.
Constantly. So that's been a big thing.
Yeah. I think that I look at like the greatest challenge, I guess you could say, or maybe not challenge, but the most in-depth, painful self-discovery mission that I've been on for 14 and a half years. If I can do that, everything else is really easy.
Right.
Like really easy.
Right.
Right. Like it's so easy sometimes that if I feel like I'm getting stressed out, I almost have to laugh.
Yeah. Well, and there's some more things that are really valuable to it too, because you have to, in order to become sober, you have to like essentially stop any behavior
Right.
that are similar to your addictive behavior.
Right.
And a lot of mine was not creating any form of boundary with certain things and allowing things to go really far because I wanted to avoid the problems,
Right.
stuff like that. As uncomfortable as it is to stop a problem in its tracks, it's like night and day with how effective you can be in business, because it's like, okay, that's unacceptable, stops right there.
Right.
Right, because if something stops right there, it doesn't have the opportunity to
Grow.
metastasize.
Yep.
Like things tend to do.
Yep. Yeah. Turn a grain of sand into a mountain.
Yep.
Because in business, that happens real quick,
Oh yeah, the snowballs build fast.
real fast.
You got steep hills.
Yeah. Steep hills, lots of snow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think that there's obviously a lot of correlation with addiction recovery, et cetera, with simultaneously great success. There's also the inverse where there's, great tragedy, right? But I think that, I don't know, I think it's invaluable for everybody at some point to hit some kind of rock bottom and build themselves out. Notice how I didn't say crawl yourself out, build yourself out,
Yeah.
right? Like, one of my favorite lines in the AA book is that it's in the instructional pages, which is the first 164 pages, but in the last two sentences it says, "Until then," right? Meaning until death, we will trudge the road to happy destiny.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like Bill W. wrote that book. Like if you look at, and I bought a first edition book with the edits in it as a gift to myself a while back, which is really cool, by the way. And it was originally written much more harshly worded. But he was so purposeful in his word choice, right? So, and I just have to know everything about everything that I learn. So I'm like, I look up literal definitions of every word that I'm like, I think I know what that means. I want to know exactly what that means, right? And the definition of trudge is just walk with purpose, That's it.
Yeah.
So we'll walk with purpose until we reach happy destiny, right?
Absolutely.
And it's like that's all we do in here all day long is trudge.
Mm-hmm. Everybody in all of their individual lives watching it are always trudging.
Right.
Everybody has bigger and better things they're working for. They have,
Hopefully.
well, they should.
Yeah.
But I think that's I think it's important to acknowledge that it's like there is no alcohol or addictions are a really easy fix, and that ultimately is exactly why they're so detrimental.
Yeah.
They instantaneously fix something, whereas anything that's good takes energy and work.
Yeah. It is just but a symptom. The problem is me.
Right. Right.
Right.
Well, I think you want to wrap it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I appreciate you guys listening to a little bit more vulnerable of a subject.
Yeah. Well, we take mental health very seriously. Take addiction and battling addiction very seriously around here. There's a team of incredibly talented humans who are all they all have their story, but, if there's anything that you want to know about us further on the topic, or if you want to get involved with Pride Roofing anyway as a client or something like that, you can trust that we're normal.
Yeah.
We're normal. We're just trying to fight the good fight, just like everybody else.
And if there is anybody that, gets any sort of touch from this podcast or video that is struggling, reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we have to say one last thing. Proud of you for fighting the big fight.
Thanks.
Or the good fight.
Proud of you too.
Yeah,
I get immense pleasure giving you your chip every year.
I'm always waiting. I'm like, he's going to do it, I think. Yeah, I think he remembers. Yeah.
I'll never forget.
And me, on the other hand, I forget just about everything. So
Yeah.
I'm usually a day late for yours. I feel like a real dick about it. But either way, it's it's a journey worth taking. So anybody who gets anything out of this, we're happy to help. And there's a lot of great people out there trying to help. You'd be surprised at just how many people this has affected and have been spun in the positive direction. You'll find a lot of interesting stories that'll make it so that you don't feel like that outcast anymore.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
All right. And we'll catch everybody on the flip side. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.